Yeah, well, we started to do rural teaching for some, but I run a couple of meetings where like they're on Zoom and the space which is different than like which is a bit more what we're doing now. Yeah, which is as I might not because I won't be able to see them. Unless
Okay.
I won't be able to see them.
I think we're ready. Yeah, and I got Zoom fired up and it is showing you right on that camera.
Okay.
Yep.
So with Zoom though, because I can't see them and see the chat, they will be able to interact at all.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because
They can always email.
it's pretty rare if somebody comes on. And this is usually just recorded for people in the future.
Yeah.
Because it's in the cloud and then they can access it anytime.
Okay.
Anytime.
Yeah, and I'm just a phone call away and an email away. So.
And I got share screen on so they can see your slides.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, so
I will introduce you real quick.
Okay.
And the microphone's on?
yeah, it is.
Good morning, everybody. So this is Kari Ann. Good morning, everybody. So this is Kari Ann Elling, and she's been gracious enough to come and tell us more about how we can reduce our waste by composting and thinking about food waste as not garbage. So I really appreciate her time and thank you for listening. And all the materials she brought are on the back table, and please just take whatever you would like.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? There's somebody who I don't know where he went, but he was asking specifically to speak into the mic, so I'll try to do that. I tend to sometimes like to wander. Good morning. It is so good to be here. On a personal note, I grew up in the Lutheran Church, and I've been attending Trinity Presbyterian Church in Tacoma the last 18, 19 years, and we are also a greening congregation, so I'm very familiar with what you all are doing. But today I'm wearing my Pierce County hat, and we're here to talk about food waste, organics, and managing all of that both at home, and we'll talk about some things you can do here. We can be fairly informal, so if you have questions, raise your hand. I am happy to stay after and answer questions regarding what we've talked about. I know a lot about recycling, so I can help answer those questions too. So what about this item, and should it go in the bin or can't it go in the bin? So happy to stay and chat at the end. And just before I get started, I'm just curious, what questions are already in the room? Did anybody come with questions that they hope get answered today? Yes.
More and more, I get takeout containers, they're compostable, but I have a teeny yard, I don't have any really area to do anything, so I'm wondering why I can't figure out how to get that composted in my garden.
We will address that in today's class. Great question. It's one that comes up a lot. Yeah. And if I don't answer it enough, feel free to poke me a little more and I can dive deeper. Yeah.
How much of what Pierce County does is comparable to what Sept does? You live in Bremerton.
Oh, that I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. So,
Could you repeat the question?
yeah, she was asking how similar is what we do or different than what we do in Pierce County compared to Kitsap County. I would have to look online to see like what are they accepting in their recycling list, how are they managing their food and yard waste. Every jurisdiction manages solid waste separately, and that has, there's lots of layers to that, but just real quick, in Pierce County, we have a separate solid waste system from the city of Tacoma. So the city of Tacoma is considered what's called a municipal hauler. And so they own the trucks. The drivers who drive the solid waste routes, the recycling routes, the yard waste trucks are all city employees. Outside of the city of Tacoma, it's a separate solid waste system where we have 3 haulers, LeMay, Murray's, and UP Refuse. So the county is not a hauler. We kind of oversee the system. We decide what should go in the carts, and we do that in conversation with the haulers, in conversation with all of the players who help process the waste. But it really varies based on what is the infrastructure that's available locally. So it's different in King County, it's different in Pierce County, it's different in Thurston, it's different in Kitsap. We try to somewhat align with our local jurisdictions the best we can because we understand it's confusing, but there's lots of reasons as to why that doesn't always work out. Yeah, great questions. Any others before we dive in? Yeah.
I don't have a compost bin, but I've been putting my food waste in a compostable bag. And I put it in the freezer until I was going to see my sister-in-law, and then I would dump it in her compost. She's moving.
Yeah.
So is there a place where I can take just the compost?
We'll address that. Yeah, we'll address that here in the class. Yeah, I can talk about a few options that I think your church can do. So yeah, but I love that you're going above and beyond. Yeah, way in the back.
How do you keep pestilent animals out of your organic food waste?
Yeah, we're going to get a little bit to that too. So yeah, good questions. All right, let's dive in, and then I'll try to pause, and then again, we can address questions at the end. So this is me, Kari Ann Elling. I am going to email the slides to Linda, so those will be available, and this is also being recorded on Zoom right now. Because I'm a public employee, I'm only a phone call, an email away. That is my job. You're not bothering me if you call me with a question, okay? So I'll make sure that information gets listed at the end. All right, just curious, is anybody in here a master gardener? Okay, one. Okay, this next slide's for you. Master gardener is caught cheating. I know, it cracks me up every single time. But yes, if you've ever composting, this is not a composting class. There is a composting class coming up in October. We'll cover things high level, but it is hard to do backyard composting and get it right and feel good about it. I'll kind of talk about my personal story with that a little bit throughout the class. But anyways, we're here to have a little fun too. All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. So we're going to cover preventing wasted food and why we want to do that. We'll talk about proper disposal and home composting, again, high level, and then collection tips and tricks that kind of address the pests and kind of the yuck factor. And then at the end, I will share where you can find resources from Pierce County, and then a little bit on recycling, and then more Q&A. Okay, so to get started, food waste is something that we end up dealing with, but we want to prevent it in the first place. So there's 7 steps, easy steps to do that. There's a quick bookmark that you're welcome to take with you. They're all on the back table that kind of outlines these steps. This is great to stick inside a recipe book. So we're going to go through these 7 steps this morning in a little more detail. So one of the main ways to prevent food waste is to plan your meals. Such a simple task that we end up not doing for all the various reasons. So I brought with me today this beautiful resource. It has a magnet on the back. There's a meal planning list, and then it's perforated. So you write your grocery list here, tear it off, and go to the grocery store. There is a cover sheet that goes with it that kind of explains the overview. Just about a year and a half ago, my husband was working out of state, so it was myself and my daughter, and she's got all these activities, and I was like, I really have to meal plan. He was the main cook in my family, and so I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. So I started to use this exact pad, and I'm a convert. I use it every single week. He's back in town. We're still using this, and we're not wasting food. We were never big food wasters to begin with. We tend to be pretty careful, but you really do, when you plan it out, you know what you're cooking that day, and then you shop by it, and then you shop your pantry first, right? And so I see what's in my pantry, see what's in my freezer, see what's in my fridge. And kind of an interesting thing I noticed in shopping is that one week I'd have like a larger grocery bill, but the next week it would be almost in half, just kind of with the flow as we were going through the food in our house. So I do feel that it saves money, and we definitely weren't wasting food, and I always budget a day for leftovers. So these are here as a resource to take with you. You can print them through the county's website. You can also request to have materials mailed to your house. So everything I brought with you here today can be sent to your home. I think we have enough, but I told Linda if we need more, I can also mail more to the church. And then grow and buy what you need, right? So you set that list, we're kind of you can plant now kind of for late fall into the winter, some things. We're kind of really past that season though. But obviously if you're planning ahead, you can kind of plan for what am I gonna have? When are all the tomatoes gonna be ripe? And then kind of plan your meals around that. This is one that it seems so obvious, but I don't know, like in our family, sometimes you do lose track of what's in the fridge, or I know what needs to be eaten first, right? But nobody else does. So I kind of like this idea. I personally not implemented. I tend to just pull those things to the front and put them in really obvious places and kind of poke my family, hey, we need to eat this, or I know to pull it out. But these are just some tips and tricks of like having a section where it says eat me first. And the idea is whatever went into the fridge should be the first coming out of the fridge. Another one is reusing your scraps. This is a physical cookbook, the Everlasting Meal Cookbook, Leftovers A to Z. So this is like a scrappy cooking cookbook for those who like to hold the book. There's also really good resources online. So this is Save the Food through the National Resource Defense Council. Lots of resources there. Again, you'll have the slides and you'll have a resource link so you can look some of these up. Another site, this is a private company, but it's Food Waste Feast. It's a really beautifully done website, really easy to figure out what am I going to do with my root veggies, what do I do with my fresh herbs, and how to incorporate those into meals. And this one's so simple, but freezing, but you got to get it into the freezer before it's ready to go, right? So you have to really think ahead. Okay, we made this big meal. My husband likes to smoke meat. And so then you'll have a lot of it. And then we've gotten really good at putting it into the right size portions. I'm training him to label and date it because he's convinced he always knows what it is, but I tell you, it always looks different months later. So label it and date it. We've learned to put the year on it. But fun fact, that food that's in the freezer never goes bad. It's always safe to consume. Now, I'm not saying it's going to taste great. Just had this personal experience. I was digging through the freezer and my husband was gone, and I was like, oh, this feels like it's been in here a long time, and wasn't labeled. Figured out it was some smoked pork, and I pulled it out and thawed it, and it had been in the freezer a little too long. I did manage to make a sandwich out of it that I got down, and I was like, I'm not going to make another one, but I do have a dog, and I do have 3 chickens, and so over the next couple of days, the dog and chickens enjoyed this smoked pork. So the consistency, it just been in the freezer way too long. But soup, it's edible, it's safe. It just might not be great. So just kind of keep that in mind. If I didn't have pets to feed, I would have put it in the food and yard waste cart. You know, you don't need to throw it away. And we'll talk about why you can put meat in like the cart, but you don't want to do that in your backyard composting. I'll address that a little later. Airtight containers, small, and just try to keep track of it. It's one of my to-dos. We have a freezer in the basement also. So that's on my to-dos to address that and really make sure that we are getting that, hey, let's plan a meal on this. And so making sure that you're staying up with it. And I'm sure we all do this, just repurposing, you know, if you buy the rotisserie chicken or if you cook that turkey, then just planning other meals from that meat. And of course, the bones always make good stock. And this is another one that is so obvious, but how we store our food really makes a difference. So I brought a lot of these with me today. So the county had these made up, and actually we were able to borrow some files from King County. We had one that was a 1-pager. We saw theirs and we said, wow, that looks really great. We do work with our neighboring jurisdictions. We collaborate. We're always trying to share and help each other out. So we were able to get these beautiful photos and get it made up. And especially for produce, how you store it really makes a difference. And there's simple things like potatoes and onions shouldn't be stored next to each other. They go bad faster, just like the apples and the oranges, right? And so just little things like that, and how you store your herbs, putting them into like a canning jar with water, cutting off the bottoms, that will make them last longer than just the bag in the produce drawer. So I encourage you to take one of these today. You might learn a few things, or maybe you're like, wow, I've got it right all these years, and that's why it works out. And the next one is preventing wasted food based on date labels. We have over 50 different use by, sell by languages that have been used in the US, over 50 on our food. So this, when you're like, why am I confused? That's why you're confused. And they all pretty much mean nothing. The only food product that truly has an expiration date is baby formula. And that's because after a period of time, the nutrient level kind of leaches down. And we obviously need our infants to have optimal nutrition. That is the only thing that truly expires. Everything else, use your eyes, use your nose, use your gut instinct. You know, when in doubt, throw it out or compost it, right? We don't want anybody to get sick. But the best by date is really just the manufacturer's recommended date for like optimal flavor and freshness. And then the sell by is the dates that stores are using for how long they should display the item. And if you're a grocery outlet shopper, again, I live in Tacoma, so that's on one of my circuits, and you'll often see things that are really close to date. They still won't put them out even if it's past date, even though they could, but it's often closer to date on dry goods than what you'd find in the regular grocery store. And that's because that regular grocery store put that back on the wholesale market, grocery outlets buying it, and it's basically giving it a second chance. On the back of your food storage guide is just a quick kind of what the slide shows here on your date labeling and what it really means, and then just some easy food storage tips. One, if you don't know, which I do use, is greens. If your greens get limp, I've done this with celery and lettuce, if they get limp, if you put them in an ice bath, like literally just fill a bowl with cold water and throw ice cubes in it, and you can even stick it in the fridge, generally only takes a couple hours. It might, depending on how bad it is, it'll crisp up and it's ready to eat like you would never know that it had ever been limp. It's really one of those food saving tips. Again, it doesn't, you can bring the quality back, but it's not unsafe. Okay, any questions on kind of the food, like preventing food waste that we just covered? Yeah.
So I've had the experience of purchasing milk and trying to be economical, purchase a little bit more of it and figured that the date was okay. And then before the use by or even sell by date, it's turning sour. What's going on? Is it the storage at the store?
Maybe, it's hard to know. I mean, the thing about sour milk, while you don't want to drink it, it's not unsafe to use. Yeah, you can bake with it. Yeah. Another personal story. Just this week, our milk had started to go just a tad sour, but I like chai. And so I have a chai mix that I like. And so I was like, you know what? I bet if I just add the chai that I won't notice. I noticed, and I was like, oh man, I tried really hard to drink it and I was like, oh, I just can't. So, but I do use sour milk in baking waffles, pancakes, all of those kinds of things. You know, when it gets to the point of curdling, then you're on the way to cheese. But yeah, it's not unsafe. It's just not really palatable. Yeah. Yeah.
If you have some milk that's soured and you want to use it, but you're not ready to bake right this minute, can you put it in the freezer?
You can freeze milk. I freeze milk all the time. So my family's not big milk drinkers, and so I've started to buy milk by the half gallon. And that way I can buy two, and then it depends on how fast we're getting through that first half gallon, but sometimes I'll freeze that second half gallon and then pull it out a couple days. It does take a while to kind of thaw out so you don't have ice crystals in your milk. But yeah, you can easily freeze milk without any problems, and you can freeze it for long periods of time. I've done that when you get to like the Woohoo deal at Fred Meyer. We've at one point had like 3 gallons of our milk. When we had toddlers going through a lot of milk, we were all about the Woohoo deal on the milk, and we would just freeze it. Yeah.
You can also use shelf-stable milk.
Yeah. There's the oat milks, the almond milks. Yeah, those are the ones I think of as being shelf-stable. Oh, there is dairy that's shelf-stable, okay. Yeah, I guess that's right, like the little juice boxes for kids. Yeah. All right, let's continue on here. So we're now going to transition to, so first thing is to prevent the food waste, but there is always going to be food scraps. There's always going to be peels, pits, stems, the inedible part of food. So that's what we're going to look at right now. So really there's 2 options, right? There's nothing wrong with managing your organic waste at home. In fact, that is the ideal. It's way less energy if you can manage your organic waste at home than having the truck come by and pick up your cart. As a resident of City of Tacoma, we cannot unpackage our waste. So we pay the bill for garbage, recycling, and yard waste, and we cannot opt out. Most cities and towns, you cannot opt out, but unincorporated Pierce County, you can. So I just want to front load with that. So I have this yard waste cart. I've also vermicomposted for many, many years. As I mentioned, I have a dog and chickens. I also have a compost tumbler. I also have some small garden beds. So I am constantly managing waste in different ways throughout the year and throughout the season. So fall, this time of year, when I start to get my gardens to bed, I'm gonna bury some of my buckets of food waste. As long as I get it down with at least 12 to 18 inches, I'm gonna dig down far. The raccoons and opossums aren't going to dig that up. And if they did, so what, right? The world's going to keep turning, but the idea is you don't want to attract vermin. Sometimes I use my compost tumbler. It just depends, right? And sometimes I'm using my yard waste cart. So you don't just have to pick a system. Sometimes people think composting is making the pile. It's not about making the pile. That is a option, but there's many, many other options. And it's fine to use your cart and do all the other things. One of the things I also personally do is I don't put leaves in my yard waste cart. I grind them up with the mower. I put them all around my landscaping. You can hoard them in garbage bags, which make then managing your waste much easier. You can make leaf mold. They're really valuable. So I recommend holding on to them. Now, if you have several acres, you're gonna have way more leaves than I do on my city lot, right? But just something to keep in mind. And we'll talk about some of the advantages of saving leaves now. And if you don't have leaves, somebody will absolutely give you leaves if you ask for them. Then it's helpful in managing the waste. You have some to give away.
How about pine needles?
Pine. They're not as ideal, a little more acidic. But anyways, so you can use both systems. You don't just have to pick one. So lots of ways to do this. There's the classic 3-bin system. There's the classic wire. Again, ideally, if you're home composting, you're going for like surface area of 3 cubic yards. So that's about the size of that bin that you see there. You can also use tumblers. The main issue I've seen when I'm out in the public or teaching a class like this, and I used to teach composting classes for the county, is people say, my compost isn't working. So then my number one question is, well, what did you put into it? Just grass. Okay, not going to work with just grass. So you have to set yourself up for success with composting. So this is our trifold brochure. This is like a basic primer. This is enough just to get you started. But it talks about these carbons and nitrogens, and I'll address that a little bit more in a couple slides here. But it gets into you have to have a mix of what's called greens. So that's your nitrogen. So grass is a nitrogen, leaves, brown leaves that have fallen are carbon. And you want to have 2 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And so if you're not building it properly, it's not going to get hot and it's not going to break down and you'll get a stinky mess. The other number one thing people forget is they don't water it. If you do not add water to your compost system, it's not going to get hot. Those microbes need the water to move through all that feedstock, and they're eating, they're reproducing, they're dying, and that's what's producing the heat. And then the other big thing is air. So that's when it comes to turning your compost. Now, that's the ideal. You can buy those manufactured, they're often plastic and black. They're black because there is beneficial microbes that kind of thrive when it's hot. So they're trying to capitalize on that using the sun's energy to heat it. Those are designed to be a more static system. You just kind of put all the feedstock in it, let it sit, and a year later you pull it out. It's fine. It's not as nutrient dense and rich as if you're actually managing your compost, but again, there's lots of ways to do it. There's the ideal, and then there's just making it work. So just so you know, and I'll address this more later, you all have space here. We have an environmental education team. If you wanted to do some on-site compost managing, we have folks that can come out and work with you and get that set up. So just want to put that out there. As I mentioned, this is not a composting class today, but there is one on October 18th from 1 to 3 at the WSU Demonstration Garden off of Pioneer in Puyallup. If you've never been out there, it's a beautiful location. They have beautiful gardens. Registration is required, and that is taught through the Pierce Conservation's District's Edible Garden series. So they host the series, but all the teaching is done by either PCD staff or the Pierce County Environmental Education team, so my colleagues. So just mark that date if you're interested in doing a deep dive into composting. And this is what I started to address. This just gives you some visuals. So those buckets on the left is what I had done for a 3rd grade classroom, actually at Mentor Creek out here years ago on the Key Peninsula, trying to get them to understand 2 parts brown to 1 part green. So we put all the green in the white bucket. We did our browns in the orange buckets. Funny story about that, we didn't have enough greens on site, so the teacher and I had mowed our lawns and collected our glass clippings and then brought them in. And it was actually that, that tumbler there is what we had done with the kids. The teacher was wanting to do, she was doing vermicomposting and then wanted to get into just a demonstration level. This is not going to manage waste for a school, but great learning for the kids. And the kids collected food waste, and then we sent them out in the yard and they collected the leaves. And it was a beautiful fall day like today. It was just great. So again, that browns and greens is outlined in this pamphlet here. And then you can see that picture on the right where it's being layered. You can actually mix it all together, would even be the most ideal. You can do that on a tarp. Again, compost is similar to baking, where you want to get all the ingredients right in the beginning and then only manage if you have to, right? Like once you get the bread ready to go and you're baking it, you can't really mess with it anymore. Composting, you only want to mess with it, okay, I need to add more water, it's not moist enough. And it needs to be way wetter than you think. It really needs to be like, if you were to pick it up and squeeze it, it's almost like the water's going to squeeze like a sponge through your knuckles. So it needs to be pretty wet to actually get it going. And then that turning. Okay, we're going to now transition to the county's yard waste system. So a year ago, April, the county went from accepting your yard waste with, we were saying, fruit and vegetable waste. We hadn't really started to advertise that because we didn't want everything in the kitchen sink and the yard waste bin. So it was kind of this bi-verbally when we were teaching classes, hey, you can put your fruit and vegetable waste in. We needed to do a little bit of some infrastructure upgrades at our Purdy facility here in order to be able to accept food waste on a larger scale. So now you can put all of your food waste. So that means fish bones, pork bones, chicken bones, your avocado pits. And that's because it's in an industrialized system. And we're making compost here in Pierce County in around 50 days. There's some seasonality to that, and we are managing it through 2 facilities. So the county owns the facility here in Purdy, and then LRI is the company that owns, we have 1 landfill in Pierce County, if you didn't know that. We have 1 active landfill. When you go to Purdy, that's a transfer station. So you're taking the garbage there, dropping it off, and then the semis are running it out to the landfill. But at the old landfill in Hidden Valley out in Puyallup, there's also a compost factory. So Purdy and Hidden Valley, those 2 facilities are processing the yard waste from the whole county system, including the city of Tacoma right now. So anything that goes in a yard waste cart ends up at these 2 facilities. And I mentioned they're doing it at around 50 days. That's because we don't allow any of the compostable bags or plastics. It's a really managed system. It's a really high quality product. It is all pre-sold at the wholesale market. So it's often sold about a year in advance. It goes all the way down to California. So the county makes it, LRI manages it, they sell it. The county's not involved with selling it. This is different than we often get the question, how come in King County they can use the compostable bags and how come they can do the compostable packaging? That is because they're making compost at Cedar Grove is the facility that this county does not own it, private company. So Cedar Grove is one of their processors. They're making compost in 6 to 12 months. It's a much longer system. You need a lot more space. We don't have capacity to store compost for months and months and months and months. The other thing about that compostable packaging, or what's called bioplastics, is it has zero nutrient value in it. It adds nothing. There's a convenience factor for you as the consumer, but it's not ideal. I also personally question like the greater life cycle analysis of the bioplastics, and I say that because so much of them are corn and soy based, to really industrialized crops in the US, often overgrown and receiving a large amount of pesticides and herbicides. So I don't know. I've yet to find good research on that life cycle analysis. I think it's hard to do, but there's no perfect, right? And so at the end of the day, we have to do what works. But that's why we do not handle those in our system. And I can jump into that right now. So these are for you to take with you. So here in Pierce County, and this aligns 100% with Tacoma. Tacoma had already been doing this for over 10 years. And so we decided, we work very closely with them since we're all in the same county. We wanted ours to match theirs, so at least we don't have that confusion. So these are your yeses. You can do the meat and even dairy. That curdled milk you can put in your yard waste cart. It's gonna have a stink factor. You might wanna freeze it before you do that. Just saying. But you can do that because it's part of this industrialized, like huge computers monitoring the air and the moisture. I mean, humans are involved too, but you have machines rotating it. Like it's very, very technical, not you in your backyard. And you're not gonna have the vermin issues. And when you start to manage food in an open system in your backyard, especially here in more kind of rural forested areas, you're gonna get all kinds of issues. So we've always recommended, if you're gonna do food waste in a home system, that you do it in a vermicomposting system, you do it in a closed tumbler, or you do some kind of backyard digester with a lid that's latched down. So these are the yeses. And it does include the people often ask about the coffee filters and tea bags. Those are totally fine. And the other thing that's okay, and this has to do with the yuck factor, is you can line the bottom of your collection bin with a little bit of paper. I'm always about the reuse. So line it with an envelope from the mail. Line it with, if you do get a newspaper, you could put a little bit of newspaper. I get toilet paper in a case of 80 and it comes wrapped in tissue paper. So I use that tissue paper to line the bottom of my collection bucket. It just helps with the yuck factor. That little bit of paper is not gonna have any effect on our system, right? But what we don't want is the pizza boxes. Oops, did it? Yeah, it did not. Let's see. There it goes. And these are the no's. So no pizza boxes. If the lid of your pizza box is clean, by all means, tear it off and put it in your recycling cart. We just can't put that on here because our college students are going to put the whole pizza. We know this, right? So, so we can't put that on there, but just kind of think about it. Is it greasy? No. Great. Then put it in the recycling system. Tear that lid off. Otherwise, it belongs in the garbage. We talked about the bioplastics. Another common mistake people make, thinking that their pet waste can go in the yard waste cart. Our dogs and cats are domesticated. Because of what they're able to eat, their gut is filled with all kinds of harmful bacteria, same with humans, which is why it's not safe to manage in our composting system. So we do want that bagged. We want that at the landfill. Obviously don't want garbage. Another big one that people get confused on is the paper plates, paper cups. Those almost always have a plastic liner to them, which causes them to not leak all over your lap when you use them. But then not ideal. It takes a really long time to break down. We don't want the napkins in there either. Again, a napkin, fine. we don't need hundreds. So just, you know, if you want to use a napkin or a paper towel to line your bucket, that would also be okay. Again, ideally, we're reusing something. Yeah.
What about compostable napkins or compostable cups? Could they go in?
No, yeah, not in our system, because even though it's fiber, it still takes so much longer to break down, and we're making compost in, you know, like I said, less than 50 days. The other interesting kind of psychology on what you allow in the system is that because we've only accepted yard waste and now food waste and no packaging, our contamination level is really low. The biggest contamination is dog toys. And sometimes like the whole cart falls in sometimes. But for the most part, our contamination's really, really low. It's that human psyche of, oh, I can put compostable things in my yard waste bin, but it is really hard to tell. Is it a bioplastic? Is it a regular plastic? Is what type of paper cup is it? Does it have a wax lining, a paper lining? Does it say it's compostable? And even the labeling on that all gets really, really funny, and it's hard. So systems that accept all that, they're also screening out lots and lots of contamination. And sometimes it just doesn't break down, and then it just ends up in an expensive trip to the landfill. So kind of these pros and cons. Ideally, we're not using single use, but if you need to use single use for the family Christmas party for your sanity, it's okay, right? But if you're not using paper cups every day, that's what we're trying to avoid. Like, are you using, here, I'll do a little bring your own cup campaign here. I'm always carrying my own, I'm a tea drinker. Everyone else drinks coffee, so I always bring my own. But yeah, just the idea is like, I'm not going to the coffee shop and getting that disposable cup. That's what we're trying to avoid, not the one-offs. It's the constant use of the single use, kind of everything, silverware, all of that. Yeah.
I always assumed that on the industrial facilities, they added heat. Is that correct?
No, air. They're gonna push air through the floor. It's aerated floors oftentimes, and then they're turning. No, the heat is all generated by the microbes.
Okay.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And they have to get it around, make sure I get the number right. I think it's 165 degrees for so many days in order to kill pathogens and weed seeds, you know, but we don't want Himalayan blackberry, or Japanese knotweed, some of those really pervasive English ivy. We don't want those in your yard waste carts, because even in an industrial system that's getting hot, it's really hard to kill those off. So we do actually want you to landfill those. Okay, we're gonna transition. So talking a little bit about what are your options for here at your church. So there's really kind of three that I see. The first is you already have a garbage service here through Murray's, I would assume. So the first thing that you could do is you would need to call them. Again, the county's not a hauler, so they're a private company, so they set their rates, is call and ask, what would it cost for us to have one cart? And they have different sizes. I think 60 gallon might be their smallest for organics. They might even have a smaller one, and you can just decide as a church, hey, we're gonna pay this fee to have this at our church. So we're gonna then separate after the coffee hour, all of our food scraps. This would then also allow you, and this kind of gets more into like an organics hub, is you could then allow folks who are in multifamily housing or assisted living or homes where they don't have it, they could bring theirs to church and they could put it in the cart. So that is one option. You just have to decide as a congregation, do we want to pay for that service? Does that make sense? The other thing I mentioned, which could also be done in collaboration with Murray's, is working with our education team to figure out, if you were to manage something on site, what would that be? What could that look like? Who's willing to manage it? And it needs to be year round, right? And so there's that option. And then it's also just working as a community organics hub. So you can bring up to 5-gallon buckets of food waste to the Purdy transfer station at no cost as a resident. So somebody here could decide after church on Sunday, they're gonna bring the 5-gallon bucket. Everybody throws their stuff in. Either they go home and put it in their yard waste cart, or they're gonna take it to Purdy. So those are kind of like the three paths I see. in trying to manage your waste. Probably the path of least resistance would be setting up service with Murray's. And then nobody has to manage it, and that card is picked up bi-weekly. So I think it would be on the opposite schedule of your garbage. Does that make sense? I couldn't even give you a ballpark on what that would cost. You would need to call, because you would fall under a commercial line because you're not a single resident. So there's different options for that. Any questions? Okay.
Do you do vermicomposting? Because, first of all, even though we don't live there anymore, we're master composters for Yakima County. So we do that. So there is nothing that leaves my house, food waste, yard waste. I mean, I have a DR food, chocolate chippers, everything stays.
Yeah.
But are you talking about vermicomposting?
Could be. If you all wanted to set up a vermicomposting system here, our education team could help you do that. Yeah, for sure.
And I take the coffee grounds home and I put them on my strawberries and blueberries and raspberries.
Yeah, and coffee grounds are fine in a vermicomposting system. It just, again, anything you don't want too much of one thing, but without having a sense of how much organic waste is coming out of your church on Sundays, it looks like you also have a preschool. What's their waste? That might be a good place to start, is just an assessment of how much waste are we producing as a congregation when it comes to the organic waste, and what is it? What is it composed of? And then that might help you decide what is going to be the best option for all of you. What's going to be the path of least resistance? So the organics, the Community Organics Hub, that concept comes out of some colleagues down in Clark County, where they only have food waste collected in yard waste carts in some parts of the county, not the whole county. So then they've actually worked with churches. A lot of churches, they have the church be a hub where people who live in that area where there's not organics collection allowed, that they can bring it to their church on Sunday, dump their organics as another way to keep it out of the landfill. And so we can kind of do like a modified version of that here. The reason why we don't want the food waste at the landfill is that it produces a really potent greenhouse gas called methane. Sometimes you read that is it 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide? Is it 80 times more potent? That's up for debate, but it's a lot more potent, and it's released pretty quickly in anaerobic conditions, which at a landfill it is, right? Everything gets dumped, it gets packed down, it gets covered. So that's what we're trying to stop. That obviously is connected to climate change. So at our landfill here in Pierce County, though, we do have methane gas collection. So we are collecting not all, but as much as the system can handle. It is very expensive and energy consuming to turn garbage gas into electricity. They have to scrub it, and it's just a dirty process of filtering all of that out. But I believe right now the landfill is producing enough electricity from the methane. So I think it's around 4,000 homes. It can generate enough electricity for 4,000 homes. And a landfill stays gassy for, a good decade, 2 decades after it's closed. So that can happen for a period of time. And then once you hit around the 30-year mark, there's just not a lot of methane that's still being produced. Some of it is sometimes being flared, because if you don't capture it and if you don't flare it, the landfill would explode, just like a shaken can of soda. It would just bottle up. So if they flare it, the reason why they do that is to burn the methane and turn it into carbon dioxide is then less potent than just letting it release as methane. But a lot of that methane's released as it's just even like going into the process, because food waste starts breaking down immediately, as we know. Okay. This is a video. I'm going to skip this. If we have time at the end, we can come back to it. We're going to move on to collection tips and tricks. So just some things you can do at home to help make this process easier, or what would work here at the church. So lots of different collection options out there. I live in the city of Tacoma, and when they rolled out their food waste program, I think it's about 12 years ago now, they gave households like a brown collection bucket. That's still what we use. It's not fancy, it's not pretty, so it lives under my sink, right? My colleague, Karen, hers lives on her counter, so she wants hers to look nice. So there's no right or wrong, but having an easy way to collect it just makes sense. So that black one on the left is metal, the one in the middle is ceramic, the one on the right is plastic and from a company called TerraCycle, and it's got 50% plastic content on it. IKEA also makes a full plastic model that's about 50% recycled plastic. This truly comes down to personal preference. The plastic ones you can run through the dishwasher. My colleague puts her metal one also through her dishwasher. The bottom, some of them have filters. I'm an avid thrifter. I see these with some frequency in the thrift stores, at the Goodwill for $5 or less. So, but having a way to collect it and make it easy, and again, I do a little bit of lining, helps. So how big or how of a collection bucket you need really depends on the size of your household and how often you want or need to empty it. Ideally, don't let the fruit sit around for a long time because fruit flies take over pretty quickly, as we know. That picture in the top right is called like a garbage bowl. When my husband's cooking, he always cooks with a garbage bowl, right? He's got the bowl on the counter, he's got all his prep, and then at the end, we dump it into the yard waste bin. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law have like a big garbage bowl. They've got 3 kids, and so they dump theirs into the yard waste cart daily, where we have the collection bucket under our sink, and I dump it when it's full. It just depends on what we've been food prepping that week, depends on how quickly that fills up. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, you can line that pail with old paper or something to help make it a little bit easier. You can also keep the pail in your fridge or freezer if you have enough space to help with that kind of smell and fruit fly issue, or put it in a Ziploc bag and then you'd dump it just straight into the cart. You can dump it in frozen. It's not going to bother anything. Again, it just kind of depends on your household kind of culture.
So you can't use the compostable bag?
No, not here, because it's that bioplastic and they just take a long time to break down. They take about 6 months to break down, and even then it's not always 100%. And there's different even quality levels. So even Cedar Grove that accepts the compostable bags, they really want a particular type because it works well in their system. So yeah, good questions. This is just a simple fruit fly trap. So they're out there. You're going to have fruit flies at some point in the season, especially coming into the summer months, but a bowl on your countertop with apple cider vinegar, just a few drops of dish soap will actually catch them. I've even put the bowl right next to my compost collection bucket underneath my kitchen counter. Yeah, it's just something that you're going to manage. I find it tends to come on like seasonally off of bananas, melons. There are certain fruits that tend to kind of breed them a little more. Again, that yuck factor at the cart, I mean, rot happens, right? We can't stop it, and food waste in particular breaks down. There's going to be a yuck factor. We all have our threshold of what's too gross. So one way to manage that is, as I mentioned, to freeze, and then you dump it in the cart the night before or the day of. I know I've heard people say too in rural areas they've had bears come to their cart. There's no perfect. People often say, I don't like the maggots. The maggots don't hurt anything. They're not fun to look at, but they don't have any negative in the system. They're part of our kind of regular cycle. That being said, in all the years I've been in Tacoma using our yard waste cart, we've never had maggots, but I've never putting meat in there because we just don't throw away meat. I have started to put bones in there now that, we can do that, but I just don't have a maggot issue. We're not throwing away cheese. Like, we really don't waste food in our family. Those are the big things with the maggots, is the dairy, the meats. But if you're just doing fruit and vegetable waste, it's going to smell a little bit, but it's not as gross. And then things you can do at the cart is you can rinse it out with the hose in the summer months. You can sprinkle some baking soda in the bottom. stockpiling those leaves. So if you throw your food waste in, then throw a pile of leaves on top. And again, you can stockpile those for the whole year. That helps. Trying to keep it away from, structures, homes. Again, sometimes it can be a vermin issue. Our cart has lived next to our house in Tacoma for 18 years, and we've never had an issue with raccoon and opossum, and they are out all the time. Like, the raccoon and opossums are there, but they're not bothering the cart for whatever the reason. And I haven't had my neighbors complain about that either. And all right, we're just gonna move real quick. We've got just 2 slides left. So county resources. So Linda had mentioned that, hey, she's like, I just did a quick Google search and discovered you have all these great class materials and old resources on your website. So again, these slides will go out and they are hyperlinked. It'll be a PDF, but a great way to find it is if you Google like Pierce County Earth Matter series. That is a series that the county teaches throughout the year, but we kind of embed those class materials. So lots more resources there. We have lots of resources we have a whole webpage just on food waste reduction. We have whole web pages just on composting. Lots out there to help you be successful. And then, as I mentioned, somewhere here, we have recycling magnets. If the church wants posters, I'm happy to get posters to the church to label your recycling bins. But if you have any questions on why are some of these things yeses and why are some of these no, I am happy to answer them, because there is always a reason. And I always get asked about glass, so I'll just preemptively answer it. We are not going to pick up glass curbside anytime soon or ever again. And the reason is because it's so heavy. And when you run a cost analysis on running a truck just to pick up glass and moving it, it doesn't environmentally make sense because of the emissions from the truck, and it doesn't economically make sense. So over the last, I don't know if it's 5-ish years, it could even be going back 10 years, kind of best practice for glass nationally is to do what we do in Pierce County, is to put it at drop-off locations. It's less than 3% of the entire waste stream, so it's quite minimal. We understand that doesn't look for everybody and they're gonna throw it away. It's okay. It's inert. It doesn't produce gases. It eventually goes back to sand and silica, like it's gonna be okay. But doing the drop off is truly the best practice for glass. And we don't want it in the mixed cart because then it contaminates all of your fiber, all of your paper. Then what it's called a material recovery facility or a MRF, what they're able to sell their mixed paper bales goes down if glass is in that system. So what we accept here in Pierce County, we do based on what our MRF, our material recovery facility, has said is going to get them the highest value. That's why we only accept certain plastics, and it's by shape because that's how they can get sorted. And those plastics, so bottles tend to be a number 1 plastic. There's a market for those. Jugs tend to be number 2s, and they get sorted into milk cartons as clear, and then like your detergent as a colored. There is also a market for those plastics, and there's a small market for your tubs that your yogurt comes in or your cottage cheese, and those are number 5s. You do not need to remember those numbers, but on like a global scale, 1s, 2s, and 5s are the plastics that actually have some value. Everything else is more expensive to process it than you can actually get value for, because it is still cheaper to buy virgin plastic in this country and other parts of the world. That's the system we're in right now. So that is why we don't take everything in the kitchen sink. The other thing too about like those salad boxes that are clear and square, kind of rectangular, those get compressed and they get flat real fast once they get in the truck. And just at the sorting facility, you've got conveyor belts, you do have people, it'll often get sorted with the paper, same thing with plastic bags, and they become a contaminant to the paper. So that's why we don't want them. And even though it says it's like a number 1, just like the plastic bottle, it's still a different plastic chemistry, even though they both have the same number. That's why there's lots of confusion. Fast forward though, in 5 years, in 2030, we are having a statewide recycling list. So there's a law passed in our last legislation, And Department of Ecology is now tasked with deciding what will go on that list. So they are putting together, they're gathering information from local jurisdictions, private companies, the MRFs, and they're gonna then advise and say, here's the things that we want to take across the whole state. What we have access to in the western part of the state is very different to on the eastern side of the state. They have very little glass recycling on the eastern side of the state because it just doesn't make sense to move it. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with glass, honestly, when we get to that. The list is going to be decided by the end of 2026, but it will not go into effect until 2030. But how lovely, right? Whether you go to Spokane or Seattle, we are very supportive of this. Having one list across the whole state will be consistent in 5 years. Yeah.
So could compostable containers be recycled?
No.
Not recyclable?
No, because they're made out of a plant product, so like a soy or corn, and that's part of the problem is you get this contamination level. So if somebody gets a cup, a lot of people don't read or pay attention. They're just like, oh, it's a plastic cup, so they throw it in their recycling cart. And so even jurisdictions that might take plastic cups, they're having a real problem with dealing with compostable cups ending up in the recycling system. They cause a contamination level.
So just as a word, we live in Harris Key over in Cedar Grove, and we collect a lot of stuff that goes to Ridlow. And this Lance goes to a couple floors over there and collects clamshells.
Great.
It is absolutely horrendous how much plastic you get in 1 week.
Yeah.
From clamshells. So, you know, I absolutely don't buy clamshells. If you buy much lettuce, buy leaf lettuce, don't buy it in those plastic things. It is just in that facility by itself. In a 2-week time, there's almost a truck of clamshells.
Yeah, I do understand. Clamshells are tricky. They don't process well through a MRF, but if they can be collected separate, there can be a market for them. So Ridwell's doing that. They're separating out. City of Tacoma at their recycle center, they have a bin where they'll collect the clamshells. Like you, I don't try to purchase things in them, but there are certain things like strawberries that come in the clamshell. So I do collect mine and take them to Tacoma. Now, there's no guarantee that they're going to get recycled. It depends if they can get a buyer to move them, but they're willing to take them and like have a space for them to do that.
The worst thing is egg cartons from Costco.
Yeah, the plastic. Yeah, so everyone has to choose what their threshold is. Like we all have to live within our values, and that's going to be different for all of us. There is no perfect. I mean, the interesting thing about the plastic clamshell is that because of our industrialized system of trucking food hundreds and thousands of miles, those work really well. They're lightweight, the food doesn't get smashed, and so it keeps the food lasting longer, so it's not going bad. It can actually get into the grocery store and get to your house. So that's the trade-off, right? It's the same thing with like the shelf-stable packaging, the tetracycle. So the soups, we were talking about the milks. It looks like a juice box, right? It's got like the dog ear flops on the side. Well, you have a plastic coating on the outside, then you have really nice, high-quality paper, and then you have a foil liner. It is really expensive to get those three things unpackaged. There's very few places in the US that are doing that. So we don't accept cartons here because there isn't a place that is willing to do it. It's the same reason why we don't take the milk cartons either. So that has a plastic liner and over a cardboard liner. Down in Vancouver, there is a place that they can do what's called a positive sort. So if you can separate all the cartons from the mixed paper, it's a win. Toilet paper companies want them, paper towel companies want them because that paper is so high quality. And if you're gonna make 100% recycled toilet paper, you can't just make it from old paper towels. Like it doesn't work. You have to have a high quality paper. Well, that's where they're getting it from. So, in the future, would we be able to possibly positive sort cartons here? I don't know. It's possible it's gonna end up on the state list. but we wouldn't be able to process them out. The problem is where we're not accepting them is they're often very wet. And if you accept them with a system where they're selling all of our paper in a mixed bale, it drives down the value because the paper companies don't want to deal with them with the rest of their mixed paper because they're wet, moldy, and they have that plastic liner. They're just harder to deal with. So this is why so much of recycling varies regionally across the country. It just depends on what's the infrastructure that can process it. And the East Coast has different markets than the West Coast, right? Of where they're shipping things. We do a lot of trade with recyclables with Canada, but there is some of it that is still going overseas to Asia. It's gotten better because we don't want to be sending them garbage, but yeah, there's lots of layers of complication. Yes?
So I think I heard you say that Goodwill will take clamshells?
I believe so. Yeah, Ridwell is they're a private company, so they provide a service. So you pay X amount of dollars to have them come to your house. So yeah, it's just another option, right? So we all are going to manage. We're all going to have different ways. We're going to manage our waste in our own ways that makes sense to us. Yeah.
Last time I took Sept to Tacoma, I had my 5, 3, 4 all separated out, and then they had me put it all in the same bin. So I think it's just gonna get bigger.
Well, 3 through 7s are often put into the same bill because they're considered like a mixed plastic. It's the lower grade of plastics that's out there, so that does make sense for them to mix them. But they're 1s and 2s they're pulling out. Yeah, oh, you can still take it there. And I think they are able to find buyers most of the time, but it's just at a really low level. Like plastic recycling does not pay for itself. Your paper recycling and your metal recycling cover the cost for plastic recycling. We're just not at that place yet. So that's why Pierce County, it kind of does a less is more. We only want what truly has some value to kind of offset the cost of it. And again, we want your metal, if we could get everybody just to put their beverage cans and their soup cans in, that would be a huge win. Or even just first of all, don't buy bottled water. From a health standpoint, I don't think it's great. It has its place, but ideally, we have really clean, safe water here in Pierce County. We are so fortunate. That's not the case all over the place, right? There's places where, they probably should have the bottled water, but not here. We have, I'm always borrowing my daughters, right? But I picked these up at the Goodwill. I love the size of metal bottles. I'm always carrying a water bottle with me everywhere I go. We are at noon. I am happy to stay and answer questions. Again, there's resources on the back. The one resource I think, or maybe it did get out there, there are, in addition to the yard waste flyer, there's a yard waste sticker that you can use on your cart. You can put it on your collection container if you have it in your kitchen, whatever it is. The other thing, real quick, if I can I need to keep track of numbers. I want to get a head count of how many are in the room. So if everyone freeze, just so I can count real quick. Nice job, 34 people. Good turnout. That's great. Those are really good numbers. It was a pleasure being here this morning. Thank you for having me. And Linda knows how to get in a hold of me. Happy to answer questions. Happy to hang out. So thank you. Oh, and let's see. Here's the.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This was super fun.
Yeah, it was
Great
great
questions.
information. So, you know what I realized?